Okay, and we're live for another edition of Nick Valencia Live. Hey, everybody, I'm Nick Valencia, an independent journalist who left CNN after nearly 20 years to launch this project on my own. It's a small team here. My wife, my friend Eric Sandoval out in Los Angeles, who's part copy editor, part photographer, and a couple other friends who just, they show up when they know I need them. And if you've ever run a small business, you know how difficult it can be, but the affirmations are all around us. Happy Thursday, guys. It's a big day here. This is July 31st. It's my daughter's 7th birthday. So happy birthday, Ellie. Super excited about that. She had a whole vision and plan this morning. She had breakfast in bed. And I remember when we woke up this morning, we had to wait about 3 minutes before we were allowed to sing her happy birthday. So she's very particular. But a big day here, nevertheless. Dropped her up at school this morning, and we are getting ready for our show today. But before we get underway and tell you who we have as a guest, we have some new information here that came in just a short time ago. And if you guys are following me on my Substack, you might have already read it. But within the last hour, we published an exclusive here that you will only read on Nick Valencia News, and it has to do with the El Salvador prison system. Many of you guys are familiar with it because you're aware that President Donald Trump struck an agreement with Bukele, the president there, someone call him a dictator in El Salvador, to send migrants, some of whom have had no due process, to be housed in these facilities where there is effectively no law and order. They've been labeled as dungeons by some human rights advocates. And what we learned is that migrants are not only in this prison system, but Americans are in this prison system. We're not talking about people who naturalize. We're talking about people who were born in this country, a person who was born in this country. Walter Hewitt, he's 32 years old, and 2 years ago, during a visit to El Salvador to go get his residency for his two young daughters, they had to go to the embassy there. He was arrested and detained wrongfully on trumped-up charges on suspicions of being an MS-13 gang member. I spoke to his wife, Jenny, earlier today, and Jenny is, she's holding up as best as she can, but this has just completely unraveled the family. So what she tells me happens is that her husband, admittedly, has an LA tattoo on his hand, he has a dollar sign on his thumb, and he has a W for Walter on his body as well. Those tattoos were misinterpreted by local law enforcement in El Salvador to mean that he was part of the MS-13 gang. In fact, she said the detail of the W on his hand was mischaracterized as being part of a West Street gang out of Los Angeles, and he was given this moniker and given basically a trumped-up charge in this state of emergency, which has been going on for years in El Salvador, and it's allowing them to skip over due process to keep detainees, pretrial detainees, from having access to their lawyers. Here's where it gets really interesting. Hewitt was in custody for about a year, and then we also obtained an exclusive document from the National Civil Police, which shows, and it's signed by a sergeant, all of this is on our Substack, which shows that his human rights were violated, that he was wrongfully detained, and it also clears him of any sort of gang involvement. You would think that would be enough to get a conditional release, but he is still in custody. He's been in custody for more than 800 days. I was alerted to this story by one of my contacts in the American Immigration Lawyers Association, who put me in touch with an expert in El Salvador. Dr. Tommy Sue Montgomery put me in touch with an expert witness, all of whom eventually got to the family, and they gave me the details about what happened to their loved one. The latest on this is just this past week, Representative Vindman in Virginia was notified of this by the family, and he told the family, according to the family, that he was going to try to run this up the flagpole and see if the State Department could do anything. You may be asking, with all the things that are pointing in his favor, why hasn't he been released? Well, according to his family, very early in this process, this has been going on for 2 years, about 800 days, but very early in this process, they did approach Senator Tim Kaine in Virginia. Because Walter Hewitt, when he was 17, he got a felony. He led police, according to his wife, on a police chase. He was in the HOV lane by himself, didn't have another passenger, and he led police on a police chase. He was given a felony. Senator Tim Kaine, according to the family, said that because of this mark on his record and this felony, which he got while he was a minor, that makes him ineligible for any sort of government intervention. So here we are here. To recap, an American citizen being held for the last 800 days in one of the worst prison systems in the world, not only for locals, criminals, but for anyone. I mean, the testimonies that we're getting from prisoners that are released or have spent time in this is that these are facilities that are not even meant for animals, let alone for people. And this is the system that Walter Hewitt, a 32-year-old Los Angeles-born American man, is being held in. We hope that this story gets some traction out there. We hope that some people start to pick the story up. Read it, share it, like it, talk to your representatives. Make sure that this story gets spread far and wide because the family at this point is desperate and they don't know where else to turn. Thankfully, as an independent journalist, we get to do the stories that we want to do. And this is one of the stories that we care about right now. This, to be clear, it is tangential to immigration. In a way, if we could tie this all back together, these same prison systems are the ones that these migrants are being sent to. The migrants that are being sent without due process are being sent to the same prison systems that now we know of at least one American being held in this, wrongfully detained in a dictator's dungeon. Much more in our Substack. We have an article, but we want to get into this show right away. We want to get into it. Let's get into what we're talking about today. Make a hard pivot here. And we wanted to talk on the show here about the Latino vote. We've talked a lot about this group not being a monolithic group. We've talked about people like me who are third generation Latinos, Mexican Americans, whitewashed, pochos, whatever you want to call us. Me being treated like I just crossed the border. Here in the South, these broad sweeping strokes, these broad strokes that people paint our community with. And we wanted to get down into the nitty gritty today. And I wanted to bring in one of my close friends, a guy who I've known for a really long time. I hope he's okay with me calling him a close friend. I've known him for about 12, 13 years. I first met Kristian Ramos, who's a Democratic analyst, political strategist. He's a TV analyst. I met him in Miami, in South Florida, at the Hispanicize conference. Hispanicize is for Latino public relations professionals. I went down there to go be part of a conference. And one of the great highlights of that conference was meeting Kristian. So I think Kristian is in the chat here. Let me see if I can add him. All right, Ramos. Let's see here. Kristian Ramos. You guys got to bear with me while I get through all my technical difficulties, but I think you guys liked seeing this stuff where I just kind of figure out what I'm doing while I'm doing it. Kristian, I hope I'm spelling your name right. Let's see. Kristian Ramos. There you are. And let's invite you in to co-host this. Nick, have you been on Wahata Ali? Y'all have a brilliant conversation. Not yet. But if you want to make the introduction, I'm willing to. Let's make it happen. All right. We're waiting for Kristian to come in here. While I do that, let me dab the sweat off my brow because I run hot. I don't know if y'all can relate with that or not. You run hot, Kristian? What's up, my brother? Welcome to the Nick Valencia Live Show. This is for showing, not for blowing. That's what I say.
No, I get it.
I usually use it to just, dab a little of the I'm a sweaty, man. I'm a sweaty guy. Anyway, come on in. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear, brother. Thank you so much, man. Let's get right into it. Here, if we could just introduce, get an introduction from you and tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Kristian Ramos. I run a small boutique firm called Autonomy Strategies. My whole reason for being is I want to give people the autonomy to do the work that they want for the reasons that they want. And I feel that Nick is, in addition to being a good friend of mine, a kindred spirit in that regard.
Yes.
In that we want to accurately represent our community and we want to do the right thing. And that's the spirit that I take for the work that I do. And then a little bit about myself. I worked for the Senate Minority Leader, Harry Reid, was there when we took the majority back.
Wow.
And was a Congressional Hispanic Caucus communications director. And then I did some work for the mayor of D.C., which was easily the hardest job I've ever had.
Wait, was that because of the person or because of the place?
I did it backwards. When you do politics on the local level like that and you live in the city, you forget or you don't realize that literally any person walking around on the street can make your day very hard.
Oh my gosh,
So you are really accountable to the communities that you're in and that you're working in. So that's a totally different ball game, totally different beast than perhaps I was used to working in the House and in the Senate. So uh, yeah, and then I started my firm in 2020. I've been doing it for 4 years, and it's been tremendously rewarding. And I'm getting a little sick of saying it, but we're living history right now. We are literally in the middle of experiencing all these things. So, please, Nick, take us away. Tell us where we're going here.
And you're right on the front line of it. Washington, back when I used to drink, it was one of those places where I was in the bar and I would feel like I needed a whisper, like who's next to me, who's standing next to me, who's sitting next to me. And then it's like, like the big cities, we hear, where do you work or what are you about? And before anyone gives you, they want to know what you do before they're
You know
giving you
what's
time.
funny about you saying that is I am really into public transportation because I just hate
Right?
living in DC. And I definitely am on the phone in the metro and I'm like, I don't know if I should be saying this right now. I don't know if I should be having this conversation here, but I do. I
Well, let's
trust
have
in
the
humanity.
conversation here in front of everybody. I want to hit you straight out of the gate here. What are Democrats doing to try to win back Latino voters? We saw how many Latino men supported President Trump in this last election. How many registered voters did not show up to vote Democratic or really for anyone? So, what right now do you see as the strategy for Democrats to win back Latinos?
So I want to say one thing. It wasn't just Latino men. I feel like Latino men get a bad rap, and I feel like Latinos in general get in a bad rap in this cycle. There's two things here. There's an age thing with that people are not talking about enough. In that uh, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they're just not into Democrats in general. They're more conservative, and so Latinos have the youngest cohort of voters in the country, and so it is. There are things that we need to do as a community, right, to speak to the aspirations of what's going on with Latinos. But I also think, broadly speaking, this is a function of Democrats have a lot of work to do with the electorate writ large. Having said that, and I think this is really an important conversation we're going to have, there are two buckets here that we need to speak to. One is what just happened with the big ugly bill in Congress. And, I like to say the Democrats for the last year were high on their own supply. And what I mean by that is they were dining out on what they did in the Obama era. And they thought that they could do things that they couldn't anymore. And they thought that what they were doing was working with Latinos. Well, let me tell you this: Republicans are freebasing crack right now with what they have done in Congress. They think that Latinos are solidly with them. And so they are like, we're going to take away their health care. We're going to take away their food assistance programs. We're going to take away we're going to raise their energy prices. And we're going to hope that they come out and vote for us regardless. And I have to say that if Democrats were smart, they would be going up with Spanish language content in places like Texas, in places like Arizona, in places like Nevada, in places like Georgia, in Atlanta. Atlanta, there's a lot of Latinos there
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
are
They
about
went
to
from
lose.
1% to 10% in the time that I've been here, part of the electorate.
Yeah, they're about to lose their health care. Their electricity bills are about to go up, and they are about to lose whatever food assistance they may be using. And so that's the opportunity there. That's the one piece. And then the flip side of it is, and then I'll let you jump in here, Nick, the immigration stuff. And I think I'm going to say some stuff that may be a little controversial here.
I hope so.
Immigration is only works, in my view, if we are able to speak to people's need for safety. And if we're also able to speak for the need to give people who are here and are contributing and are working hard for our country a pathway to citizenship. If we just do one of those things without doing the other, we're going to lose some Latinos and the general public. And the safety part, I think right now within the Democratic Party, there's a group of people who's very comfortable with talking about security, the border security, da 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 da, but doesn't ever really want to talk about pathway to citizenship. And then there's another group of Democrats who are only want to talk about a pathway to citizenship, only want to talk about helping adjust people's status. To really move voters on this issue, you need both. And it used to be when I worked back when I worked in immigration, the most popular it ever was when you said, okay, we're going to figure out interior enforcement, right? We're going to figure out how to stop people paying immigrants under the table, right? We're going to get them a fair wage, and we're going to figure out how to adjust that. And then we're going to figure out what we're going to do at the border. We're going to try to help people come in the country legally. We're going to bring in people that we want, and we're going to keep out those that we don't. Right? We're going to keep out drugs. We're going to keep out gang members. But there are some people here who have, who want to come and contribute, and we should find a way to let them in. And then finally, we've got to adjust the status of the people that are here that are doing this work. And again, that is a very popular formula. For whatever reason, in the intervening time since I was working on this, and now we've stopped talking about it in this way, and it's hurt us with Latino voters. Latino voters, if you look closely at the polls, are very supportive. Are supportive of the mass deportation stuff. They are,
Yeah.
and there's some, it is a loser when people start to experience it, but when people start to really see what it does to their communities. But if you just ask them, like, "Hey, should we get these people out of the country?" They're like, a lot of Latinos will say, "Yeah, yeah, it is."
It all sounds good on paper to kick out, illegal immigrants and make this safer. I could see why somebody can get behind that who's just thinking in sort of black and white, but it really does seem to be selective law and order. And you bring up so many points about, those that willingly and knowingly, even though they say they're not certain that someone is undocumented. It's like the big known secret, right? That these large corporations employ undocumented labor, and it ends up the punishment comes down on the individual, not on the brand or the owner. We could talk about that and pick it up, but I want to talk about something that and dovetail off a point that you just made about the Obama years. I remember being a young Latino during those campaigns, the digital presidency of Barack Obama, the Facebook push, feeling as though somebody helped make our community feel seen. It felt like we were being talked to directly, not talked at. And it felt like, he even borrowed a phrase from one of our great Latino leaders, Cesar Chavez, yes, we can, si se puede. And there was a lot of familiarity there for us in 2008, 2012. What happened? Where did Democrats lose that steam? Where did they lose that momentum? And why are we here now?
So I think this is such an important question, right? And I think it goes to to the point you're making about feeling seen. In 2008, I was a single guy. I worked in the Senate. I went out to Colorado to go and work on that campaign. And I'll never forget, I was there, and I worked in a place where there was both Latinos and Black voters. And on that night that he won, I'll never forget, I was in a Black church, and the pastor started crying, and everybody was fucking crying. And I was being like a toxic Latino male, I guess, because I went to my car and then I started crying because I didn't want people to see me like break down because it was so like emotional. It was very emotional for me. And I was I was very into, I could do that. I could just pick up and go, and I could leave, and I could go there. And then in 2012, they doubled down again, right? That election, in addition to the DACA stuff, people forget it really was about the fact of who cares about you more. Mitt Romney is a rich guy who has got binders full of women, who is firing people, Americans, and moving all of his corporations overseas to get out of taxes, versus Barack Obama, who's giving you health care and so on and so forth. And so that was the high water mark for Latino voters. And then if you look
They were
since
talking
then,
about issues that felt important to us. They
yeah,
were talking
yes,
about issues that were directly impacting us. Yeah.
right. And then as we go on from there, we get to 2016, we get to 2020, we get to 2024. And what happens in those intervening years is I got married. I moved to the suburbs. I had a child. I started to really worry about my mortgage. There's all these life things that happened to me. And what didn't change in how the Democrats talked to Latinos was it was the same stuff. In fact, it became even more focused on a single issue. And it
You grew up and the messaging didn't evolve with you.
no, it didn't change. And the way that they talked to us and where they talked to us didn't change. And so I distinctly remember during COVID, I was actually literally in my office, in my home office. And I remember thinking, like, yeah, no, I know Donald Trump's a maniac and he messed up COVID. And, I know things are bad. Who's going to help me get make things better? Because nobody was talking about that on either side. Trump was trying to defend his record, and Democrats were just trying to beat up Trump for messing up on COVID. And
And he was so good at controlling the message. He is, I push back on my friends who think he's an idiot or call him dumb. I think he's a brilliant marketer, and he's like this WWE president that understands optics. He understands the narrative and how to control a stadium full of people's attention.
well, and I think look, COVID is also really important in this story about how we got to this point with Latinos, because if you look back to 2008, again, you go back to there, and you had that big financial crash, and you had everybody came out of that and they said, we're not going. And Malala was the big leader. Did you remember Malala? Nick, can you tell everybody who Malala was?
Yeah, 2012, she was an Afghan girl who famously said that women deserve education. And she spoke in front of the United Nations and was a rallying cry for women, young women all across the world to care about education, not just for young boys, but for everyone.
So everybody came out of that election, 2012, and they were like, we want to be like that. We want to come together. We want to solve these big problems. There's a lot of optimism. COVID comes along, right? And Latinos are hit probably the hardest. There's probably an argument to be made whether African Americans and Latinos were hit. Who was hit harder? But we were hit hard.
Yeah.
And we were working, and we were, showing up to work unvaccinated and dying at these huge numbers. And people came out of that experience and they were no longer like, I want to help everyone. They were like, who's going to help me?
Wow.
Because I've lost family members, because I've lost my savings, and I just need somebody to take care of me. And I think Democrats missed that. And this is not my theory. I actually heard this first from Michael Frias over at Catalyst. But to me, that is the change that occurred. And so suddenly they say, well, who's for me? Guess who was for them? Donald Trump was for them. Donald Trump was the guy that was going to get them a better job, was going to
Well,
help
when the
them.
messaging gets muddled down and it gets simplified, and it gets simplified to these Willie Horton-esque ads of the trans women or trans men are going to come into the bathroom and rape your kids, that all of a sudden becomes important, even though it is such a small percentage of society.
What
Even though trans people just want to exist a normal life, right?
we did.
Even though there's only 10 NCAA or less than trans athletes, that becomes the message. That's what I heard from some of my peers that became, the economy was supposed to be the important thing. And all of a sudden they're talking about trans kids in schools. How does that get mixed
Well,
up?
actually, so somebody just commented here. It just went through real quick, but like, let's talk
Yeah,
about misogyny, racism, and everything else. We are going to go there because in
yeah,
2023, I want to say, like pretty early on, I was lucky to do a poll for Anamandi and the good folks of Way to Win, Valiente Action Fund. And when you look and you ask Latino voters, you know, do Democrats care about you? And people will be like, no, they don't care about you. Well, what do you think about Democrats caring about trans people, Ukraine, like everything other than them? And so that was baked into this conversation like 2 years before the election even happened. And Democrats never spoke to that. They never were very clear about like, hey, this is all the things that we've done for you. And you know what? The system is rigged against you in a lot of ways. And there are these corporations and things like that. Look, I missed, as somebody who's done this for a long time, the rage within the Latino community, the populist anger over what has happened over the last decade. And what I mean by that is the middle class being slowly eroded for the billionaire corporations and so on and so forth. And what I think, to bring you up to 2024 and where we are today in 2025, the Republicans have a real problem on their hand because they literally are taking money that would go towards Medicaid. And by the way, there's 70 million people on Medicaid, and 30 million of them are Latino, and most of them are children,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
And so they just took away all of that money to pay for tax cuts for billionaires. They just took away food assistance from all of these people. They are raising your electricity bills by getting rid of all of the Inflation Reduction Act subsidies that were keeping the prices low for your energy bills. And they took it and they gave it back to the mega rich. And so that has to be a part of the conversation here, in addition to all of the horrible immigration stuff. And I tend to think that the balance of that is off. I hear a lot more about the immigration stuff than I do about the horrible things that people are doing to your ability to pay for your sick child's health care. That is a huge, huge issue because that is an economic issue, right? If eggs are $12 and you're paying $200 for your heating bill, and then your kid gets sick and it's like $500 because you don't have health insurance, that's a disaster for most Americans.
And we find ourselves in this potential reality, it seems like, because Latinos have now become a swing voter, become a scorned voter. And it's like, you bringing this up of, we had in the chat as well, the colorism, the potential racism as well, misogyny in our community. And it's like, well, I'm going to go vote for a guy that, reminds me of my Theo or my Tias or the stuff that we've heard, growing up, right? I don't understand this person over here. Do you think that, I had dinner I guess last week with Mike Madrid, or I guess it was on the podcast with Mike Madrid. I had dinner with Chuck Rocha. He's a political consultant, analyst. He
A
was on,
friend, you
yes, he's great. He's great. I was on this podcast the next day and I got into a conversation exchange with Mike Madrid, who's a Republican strategist. And I brought up, the colorism that I've seen in my personal experience and my lived experience, and misogyny. He said it was a very dangerous characterization to put on Latinos, specifically. I hear that, but it doesn't make it untrue. It doesn't make what I've heard my friends say in high school and growing up, the stuff that they think is okay to say now and appropriate. So let me hammer this point home. Do you think that we're even having this conversation if it wasn't a Black woman that was the choice for Latinos to choose between that, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump?
when I was growing up, I had an uncle who pulled me aside once and he said, "Listen, like, everyone's racist. Everyone's like you've got got Latinos who are racist. You have like this group of Latinos who hates this other group of Latinos for whatever reason, and then you have the white people and the Italian. Everybody hates each other." And I said, no, that's probably not true. But having lived through the last 20 years of this political experience, yeah, yes, I think it's probably true that there is some form of racism all over the place. But what I find fascinating about this conversation is that every person watching here probably has a friend, a family member who is not politically correct,
Yep.
who they still love because that's the guy that they grew up with and played football with, or that's
Yep.
the guy that, helped them out when they were on a rough time or whatever. And I'm not excusing people's racism. I'm not excusing people's, sexism or whatever, but it is a fact of life. And I think Democrats are way too precious about all of this stuff. I think we are like not dealing in reality on some of this stuff when we try to act like, it's not a thing that is out in the world. And I don't know how you look at 2024 and you're not thinking, you don't reach this conclusion that, yeah, like some people are very uncomfortable with a Black woman president. And, I, I wish it wasn't like that,
I wish it wasn't like
obviously.
that either. I feel like one of the things I think to be true in my life is that the darker your skin is in this world, the more difficult it is in society, the more difficult society makes it for you. So whether or not you're an Afro Latino or an African American or somebody who was born, on the continent of Africa, the darker your skin is in this world, the more difficult and challenging you have it, I think, and this idea that colorism doesn't exist in our community and that we can't talk about it, it holds us back. And I do think, I asked this question sort of rhetorically. I don't think that we're having this conversation if it was, maybe not so anyone else, despite how qualified she was, despite the campaign that she ran. And I know I'm going to get pushback from some of my Trump friends that are watching. What qualifications they say did she have besides putting black and brown people in jail for weed? I don't want to go there, right? It was a lawyer. She is she has a pedigree that, regardless of whether you like her politics or not, you got to respect it. I respect it. And I think that part of what turned people off at the ballot box was the color of her skin, unfortunately, and the fact that she's a woman. Mike Madrid and others will push back at me and they'll say, hey, there's data that shows she's been overwhelmingly supported by Latino voters. They point towards Hillary Clinton's support. How many people didn't vote for her, though, Christian? How many people didn't show up to vote?
I'm not even going to go there because I think this is a dumb argument, as dumb conversation. So no offense to you, but I will just say this: who out here on this call has not experienced some form of racism? I'm just telling you, like every single person out there experienced this stuff, and like to think that like okay, somehow on the national stage, this thing that you experienced probably multiple times in your life does not like affect anything is like wishful thinking, I guess. I don't know. It's tough. I mean, I've said this privately and fuck it, I'll say it. We're on Substack. I might as well. So it'll live here forever because I think it's true. The worst racism or the biggest sting has always come from people of color. Because you expect it from white people. You're like, oh, you know what? Like this person is going to say something probably racist at some point. But then your guards down or whatever, and you're hanging out with whoever, and then it just comes, and then you're like, oh, well, fuck that hurts.
Yeah, it hurts, man, because you don't want it to be real, or you hold them to a different standard. I hold them to a different standard. I want to pivot to make the conversation a little bit more personal because I left CNN after
Yeah.
after 20 years, almost 20 years. And one of the things that we talked about in our pre-interview before the show yesterday was sort of just like, man, if I'm being vulnerable and real, man, I still cry a lot. I still get emotional about losing the status that I had of being the guy in the suit, that walked my kids to school in the morning and having that feeling because I feel really uncomfortable here in the South. My lived experience has been one that's been really difficult out here. And I got treated like I just crossed the Rio Grande when I showed up here. And I feel sometimes the only thing that made me feel as though I belonged was that, like, hey, I've got this job title, I've got this position, and I'm important. And since leaving CNN, a part of me has really struggled with coming to terms with that and feeling like I went from being the brown guy in the suit in the South to just being a brown guy. And I know that a lot of people, and this is, someone like me with the pedigree, with the way I speak and all this stuff, married a white wife and all the things that I have, right? Um, I don't know, man. That's really hard for me. And I just wonder, I know Washington, especially the political world, the consultant world is very white. It's very Anglo, very wealthy. Even if it's not right, it comes, people come from money and wealth. How do you navigate that as somebody who is so successful in your field and who has to traffic in these circles where you may not feel comfortable?
At some point, I want to write this down. At some point, I want to write this because I think it's very important. I truly believe that Latinos exist in America in a place that is an undiscovered country. We exist in a space that people don't really think about or care about. And what I mean by that is you want to talk about let me be very clear. We should fight racism and I do not approve of it. But
No, you don't.
I can tell you
In fact,
explicitly.
I've heard somebody say the N word in front of you, and you were the only one at the table who checked them. Who checked them, Christian?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
remember that was the respect immediately that I had for you. We were sitting down. at a table, somebody thought they would be funny and
Yeah.
throw that word out and be
Yeah.
hip. And you were like, that's not funny. And so
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
where your
Well,
heart.
let me explain. Let me explain. When I say we live in an undiscovered country, I experience it a lot of different ways. In that, I will meet white people who are very well-meaning, and they will say, "Well, you must be Italian, or you must be Asian or Filipino," and they will never be like, they'll never guess Mexican because I don't speak Spanish. And then when I say, "Well, no, I'm Mexican American," they'll be like, "Oh, well, you're very well." You're very articulate. And I'm like, yeah, there are a lot of fucking articulate Mexicans here who have been here for like 8 generations or
Why
whatever.
do you speak English so good,
Yeah,
Christian?
yeah, like I get that a lot. But then I get it the other way. And this is really where we live in an undiscovered country. I can't tell you how many people will come up to me and will start speaking Spanish. And then I will just, be like, mi español es muy mal or whatever. And you can see the shame in their face. You can see them just being like, "This fucking self-hating Latino, like, this guy's the worst." I was born in Texas, and my parents, when they spoke Spanish, they would get hit in schools. And so they just never taught me Spanish, and it was always an issue with my family. My other cousins were like, "This guy's not Mexican. This guy's like a pocho or whatever." And they just really othered me. They really made me feel like, "Oh, I'm not part of the gang. I'm not part of the cool kid." And so you asked me, like, how do I deal with it in DC? It's my whole life has been like that. My whole fucking life has been just like I live in an undiscovered country. It's like, woof, Mexican American who, writes well, speaks English, cares about, you know, uh, literature and wants to be a writer. Like, who the fuck? I might as well be from outer space. For a lot of people, I might as well be
And
like,
yet I sit here and I'm like nodding my head because I was the pocho mexicano, you know? I'm
like,
third generation just like you. And my parents were like adamant though that like I needed to speak Spanish in order to connect. So gracias a Dios que todavía puedo hablar, okay? But es un milagro que todavía puedo hablar en español. But my kids are going to struggle with that. And they're probably going to have the experience that you are talking about. My son is Ricardo Antonio, named after my dad. These are the realities of stuff I feel like I don't hear people talk about because they paint us with these broad strokes. We're all this one group of people. Right now, you talk about, I love that line, the Republicans freebasing crack, thinking that we're all on their side, Democrats kind of taking advantage of us. No one is really speaking to us. What hope do we have? Do you see anyone out there, any candidate, politician that you see really kind of gets it and sees that generational breakdown of us in our community?
uh, that's a tough one. If I'm being honest, y no, I don't see anybody doing that. I see candidates that I like for 2028, and I think that they could do that. But I'll also be very honest. I don't think Latinos have ever had less political power in my time doing this. And what I mean by that is Republicans don't give a shit about us at all. They don't. I mean, they 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 are, I think they know how to talk about certain issues that we care about well, but in terms of like what they will actually do for our community, they don't care at all. And I think there are groups of Democrats who look at what happened over the last 10 years and don't know what to do with Latinos. That don't know, like, we are like we are the people who, like, are they conservative now, or like what's going on? And years ago, a guy took me to side and he said something that at the time I thought, this is so obvious that it's stupid. I don't even know why we have to say this, but
Yeah.
he said to me, he said that the thing about Latinos is they just want to be seen as a part of a team. They don't have to lead the team, but they have to see themselves in the story that you're putting. And they have to see their lived experience. They have to see their lives. And that's how you make them, that's how we bring them into the conversation.
I think
You know,
about this in terms of my own industry. I don't need a show that starts with salsa music and maracas and somebody that's like, like I just want to see myself. I just want to see somebody that looks like me, and it doesn't need to be a Latinidad or Chicanismo newscast. We just need to be reflected there. You don't say there's room at the table. Build a bigger fucking table, dog. Right? That's it. Punto. That's all we need. I don't
yeah.
know. I'm getting riled up here.
No, no, no.
And I'm also looking at my battery life and it's crashing. And I hate the fact that like it's even crashing. And because like I feel like we're just getting going here. What haven't we asked you, while I have this limited battery life here, what haven't I asked you that you think is really important to know that you want to get in if we get cut off here? What's on your mind?
I get asked all the time a similar question, like, who are the leaders, out there that are, doing the hard work and that are fighting? And I'm gonna say what I say to everybody. Look to your left, look to your right. Those are your leaders right now. Like, I believe in a thing that I call bottom up narratives. I think we have to be better about being leaders in our communities and being honest. And it's important to differentiate. I don't think we need to like wag our fingers at people because they're doing something that we don't like. I think it's like we need to be decent human beings and we need to have radical empathy. And I'm not particularly religious, but I do feel very strongly that, you know, we have to be good to each other. And we have to accept that there's some things that we don't love about everybody, and and there are things that we have to figure out how to work together regardless. And so, yeah, I think that's the opportunity here. I don't know where Nick went, but, I'm trying to look at these chats. Does anybody have any questions while we wait for Nick to come back? If he comes back, throw him in the chat. I can see the chats. Um, yeah. No, so that's it. I just feel very strongly about that. I mean, one of the things that I'll never forget during the, COVID times, going back to that, it was really fascinating. I live across the street from, El Salvadorian evangelicals, and they came over to my house with, uh, groceries. And I'll never forget, I opened up I didn't need them. I said, "Thank you," and I took them, and I brought them over to my house, and I opened up the box of groceries, and they were for Donald Trump. They were from Donald Trump. They literally said, "Please take these groceries in this time of need." And that was it. And so, like, how whatever else you could say about the Republicans and how awful they are, they understand that. They understand that, people need groceries and they need help and they're gonna put their names on them and so on and so forth. And I just wish the Democratic Party went back to that. I wish we would be there to on that ground level of people's day-to-day lives. I'm a dad, a father, and I run a business, and I don't have time for, like, anything. And so, who's talking about that stuff? You know? It's Republicans. They do talk about that stuff. They do. And in our party, we talk about I don't know what we talk about sometimes. I wish we did talk about these things more. Um, but yeah. Anyway, I really, don't have much more to say here, but, I do thank everybody here. And if they have questions, I can open it up for questions. Anybody Oh, wait, Nick's back, I think. Something's back. This is definitely a first for me in an interview. This is very exciting. I don't even know how to turn this off. So, because this is Nick's live. This is, flying by the seat of our pants, really. I do wanna it's so funny, I see people signing up for my Substack. My Substack is literally it's called Off Road because I do wanna my view is that politics is downstream from culture, and culture is like Democrats are not with the culture anymore. I think that's the other thing that people are really struggling with in DC is that I think since Barack Obama, we had the culture, right? We had music, we had everything. And this cycle, we had Taylor Swift, we had Beyonce, we had all these people who came out to support our candidate, and we lost. And culture is and are not. Oh, okay. There we go.
There we go. Hey, I'm back. This is the fun stuff, man. Here, hold on, hold on, hold on. All right. Are we back? Are we back? Can you hear
back.
me?
We're back. I
Okay.
agree with you.
I am the goofball that was like working on an exclusive story and right before I joined here and like sucked up all my battery life, right? So I am so sorry, guys. Thank you so much for dealing with me. Nelly, I see the emoji. That's hilarious. So you want to just pick back up where we left off?
Yeah. Well, let me just finish this thought because
Okay.
and you can jump in. I was just talking about how Democrats for the last 20 years since 2008 have been where the culture is. And this cycle, we had Los Tigres del Norte, we had Maná, we had Beyonce, we had Taylor Swift, we had everybody come out for Democrats, and then we still lost. And so I think we are no longer where the culture is, and I think this is just something also that we need to address and just be real about. And it's interesting, right? I don't know how many of you guys watch Charlemagne the God, but I'm a big Clips fan, and I remember I was watching an interview they did recently, and I was like, "Fuck, man, we're not, we're nowhere on this stuff. We're nowhere on this stuff. We are way away from where people are thinking about these things and how they're thinking about these things." And so, like, that is something that we have to address. And I think the reason that we're not is because we've done this shit this way for 20 years. And I can tell you in a marriage, I mean, I don't know how many people are married here, but in a marriage, sometimes you have to change things. You got to change how you do things. You have to change how you do things. And sometimes it's your partner, or sometimes it's you, but like that happens. And like our marriage, the Democrats' marriage with the electorate is going through a bumpy spot right now. And we gotta do things differently. But there's always resistance to change, and we're dealing with that in a very real way right now. And so when I say people like in the audience, that you be vocal and decent, right? I think the thing that's found, just to go back to the decent thing, one thing that I found really hard about the Trump era is, I had so many friends who would be like, "Oh, well, so and so is a MAGA supporter in my family, and I don't talk to them anymore." And it's hard, man. Like, you're just not going to talk to your family member anymore. Like, I get it. Like, he's an asshole. I get it. But like, that's your family. And some people are like that, and I understand it. But like, if you can't be at peace with your family, like, how are you going to go out into a community and persuade strangers to support whatever it is that you're doing, right? Like, that to me is where it's like, if this person doesn't agree 100% with me, I don't want to fuck with them. Then I don't care anymore. Well, that's really not how it works in life, generally speaking. It does not. It's definitely not how it works in business. And so, you know, I get it. You don't agree with them and whatever, but you know, you do have to find a way to coexist in some way. Like, the tribalism in this country is terrible. I think it's what's allowed Trump to just be insane, and his people support him because they feel like, oh, this guy hears me. He's not going to judge me. He listens. And Democrats need to listen. Democrats need to be, you know, better about this stuff. And I don't know where Nick went, but yeah. Does anybody have any questions? I don't know what's going on with Nick. And I also don't know how to turn this. I don't even know how to leave this. This is my first Substack live. This is my first Substack live, so I can't hear Nick. Yeah, no, I can't hear you though. Is it me? I don't know. Okay. Well, thank you everybody. Very, very exciting. Uh, hope to do it again sometime. Thanks, Nick. Bye, everybody. Let me see if I can. Oh, there you go. I'm ending.